Hi, I'm David here, and welcome back to the channel, where we're looking at life in spirit through the automatic writings of early 20th century medium James Padgett. I'm a little late uploading this video, so apologies for that. Sometimes the practicalities of life do just get in the way. In the last midweek video, 215, we looked at the second of three messages given to James on the evening of March 7, 1916. That message was from a gentleman by the name of John Carlisle, who was a prominent US politician towards the end of the 19th century. And he spoke very clearly about the hold that earthly ideas can have upon the mind, even with the help and support of more advanced spirits. John was put in touch with James Padgett's old law partner, Anthony Riddle, who he sees is much brighter and happier than himself, and with Padgett's wife, Helen, whom he describes as even brighter and more loving than Riddle. Both of them have told him that this is because of the extent to which they share in divine love, and they have worked hard to persuade John Carlisle of this, and of the need for him to pray for that love so that he might also begin to share in it. John was finding difficulty in accepting that this is possible, partly because the idea was new to him, and partly because of the hold that his earthly ideas and beliefs still had upon him. Nevertheless, he told us in his last message that he was starting to have times when he felt he could hope to get out of his darkness. John also told us that he felt more capable of making this effort when Anthony Riddle and Helen Padgett were with him. So let's see how John has got on in the last 18 months between that previous message and the one we're looking at today, which was given to James Padgett on September 29, 1917. John begins as follows. I am here, John G. Carlisle. Well, my friend, I have not written you for some time, not because I did not desire to do so, but because I have not had the opportunity, for I have been present many times when other spirits were writing to you. I have also been present when you and your friends have talked about spiritual things and have listened with very close attention, and have derived much benefit from thinking of what you have declared to be the truths of the spiritual kingdom. As a consequence, I have progressed very much, and am now in considerable light, and have received into my soul sufficient of this love that you talk of, to be convinced that it is a wonderful redeeming influence from the darkness and suffering that I and spirits like me found ourselves in when we came to the spirit world. So all in all, John sounds much more positive than he did in his two previous messages. It's interesting that John speaks of learning from the conversations that Padgett and his friends are having about spiritual matters, based on the things being taught to them by Padgett's other spirit communicators. You might think that people in spirit would just talk directly to each other, but there are many people in spirit whose thoughts are still focused upon the earth plane, and they can be unaware of the more advanced spheres in spirit and those who live there, or embarrassed by the thought of being compared with them, so shy away from them. So their opportunity to learn of more advanced spiritual matters often comes from listening in on conversations between more highly developed spirits and people upon the earth they're communicating with, or even simply from listening to people upon the earth chatting about what they have learned. One example of this would be someone upon the earth who is learning to become a spiritual healer, for example, or who is developing some other form of mediumship. The shared activity of the person upon the earth and their spirit guides is an opportunity for other people in spirit to watch, listen, and learn. Every time I create one of these videos, I have people in spirit with me. Every time you watch one of these videos, you will have your people with you. Some may be there to encourage you, some may be learning with you. When I started this channel, I was told very clearly that people in this world aren't the only ones listening, and that I should keep this in mind. So when John Carlisle tells James Padgett that he learns much from the conversation James and his friends have, even though Carlisle is the one in spirit, it does start to make sense when we stop to think about it. The other important thing Carlisle says is that he is convinced, as a matter of experience, that divine love is the great thing that will lift him out of his current spiritual condition. He continues, I know that prayer is a thing that brings its response, and I am praying with all my soul, but it is hard to make a complete surrender of my beliefs and to forget the deeds of my life that cling to me with such a very great tenacity. While, as you have said in your conversations, and as some of the bright spirits tell me, the true longings of the soul will bring to my soul this love, yet I find it difficult to get these longings so that they are not mingled with the thoughts of earthly things that came with me when I became a spirit. So although John Carlisle tells us that he has gained some of this love, his old thoughts, attitudes, and beliefs still cling to him. He wants rid of them, but this is as tricky as wanting to be someone else. It can be done, but it takes time. Developing and strengthening the true longings of the soul through sharing in divine love is a process that has to be worked at. Personal characteristics that get in the way of this process don't just fall away overnight, much as we might wish them to. John continues, as you know, when on earth, I accumulated in my memory a large and varied amount of evil and sin. And when I became a spirit, I found it very natural that these memories should be with me and control my thoughts and desires as they did on earth. In fact, they seemed to get rid of some member of my body without injuring the body. That last sentence is a slightly tricky one to make sense of, but I think what Carlisle is getting at is that casting off the physical form at death doesn't cause any kind of injury or change to who we are. We can leave the physical form behind, but the same person is still there, being expressed through the spiritual body, which reflects our nature more directly than our physical form does. Leaving behind the physical form doesn't change that spiritual body by which our nature is displayed. We are still the same person, for better or worse. The physical form we inhabit is just part of the totality of who we are, and it is not an essential part. As John Carlisle says, so you will see, it is not so easy to have these longings that I speak of, meaning soul longings for divine love. And even if a spirit makes up his mind and will to have the longings, he cannot always succeed. This has been my experience, and I have suffered so very much in consequence of this inability to direct my will to these longings. Intellectually, I understand that this is necessary, and that the longings, when earnestly possessed, will bring relief and surcease from these sufferings. But this intellectual knowledge, I find, is not sufficient. The knowledge does not bring the power to will, and the will is controlled by appetites and desires. I know that I must try to control these appetites and desires, but oh, how hard is the task. Essentially, what John Carlisle is saying here is that knowing we should do something is not the same as wanting to do it or having the will to do it. It's perfectly possible to know the importance of doing something as an intellectual matter without feeling the importance or urgency of it or being moved to do it. John knows mentally the importance of prayer for divine love, but he speaks very clearly of also knowing experientially how difficult it is to make himself really want to do it. John's soul longings are only just beginning to develop, and they remain weak as compared to his existing habits of mind. As his soul longings become stronger, they will come to be a more obvious feature of his sense of who he is, and this then becomes like a process that snowballs. The tricky thing is to get going. When one's soul senses have been neglected and are like seeds only just beginning to germinate, they need a lot of care and attention to make sure they take root and strengthen, and they need feeding as they grow. At this stage, there is no point expecting too much of them in terms of fruit or any kind of harvest, because they are as yet a long way even from flowering. As Carlisle says, it is very foolish for men to suppose that they can cultivate and exercise these desires and appetites until a time convenient to them, and then, by the mere wish, control these desires and have these longings and aspirations come to them, so that the help that comes in response to prayer will be theirs. No, they will find themselves greatly disappointed, for they will realize that these desires and the results of their indulgences will bind them in bands of iron that a mere intellectual attempt to sever will not prove efficacious. Putting things off until tomorrow is a sure sign that we don't value them and don't truly want to do them, however much we might tell ourselves otherwise. If we pass to spirit not having bothered to develop spiritually, we arrive there as someone who still doesn't feel the importance of bothering to develop. The habit of putting things off will still be part of who we are. This is one reason why seeking divine love is something to get started on right away, today, whichever side of life we're on. If we don't choose now, it's because our existing desires and habits of thought already imprison us. Carlisle continues, "The spirits who all have this love of which they tell me teach me that this love is sufficient to bring happiness to me, and that it will come in response to earnest prayer. But they do not tell me that by the sudden exercise of my will, I can obtain these true longings. And if they should so teach, I could hardly believe them, for I have had such a will and have attempted to pray, and as I think, wanted to be in all earnestness, but still the longings would not come free from the memories of my sinful life on earth. And I find that I have to continue to pray in order to progress the little that I have progressed. John Carlisle has already told us that he has some divine love in his soul. So in referring to other spirits who all have this love, he is referring to other people who share in it much more fully than he yet does. He does sound like a determined and willful man in the sense of having a strong will, and yet he has difficulty exercising it in new, unfamiliar ways. Yet he is making progress little by little. He has already discovered that progress comes through prayer for divine love, but that he has to keep at it in order for that progress to continue. It doesn't just happen on its own. Free will is never taken from us. The good thing in John Carlisle's case is that he has made enough progress to be convinced that he is on the right path. As he tells James Padgett, I have no doubt that the love is waiting for me, and that I will be enabled to obtain it by the proper condition of my longings. But the trouble is to get the proper longings. It is not so easy to get rid of the effects of evil deeds and evil thoughts on earth. And the mere praying with the mind will not help, except such prayers become merged into the prayers of true longings. Well, I realize all this in my own experience, and I am praying and longing, and sometimes I feel the true longings, and then comes the response. And I progress just that much. I mean, in proportion to the strength of these true longings. These are baby steps for a soul that is only beginning to be born into divine love. The mind is powerful and has powerfully established habits, but the soul senses aligned with divine love. The longings that Carlisle speaks of are still at the green shoots stage. The wonderful thing is that Carlisle has taken those baby steps, and the experience of doing this has shown him that there is, in effect, a simple formula to follow. Prayer plus response equals progress. The trick, of course, is knowing whom to pray to and what to pray for. Carlisle reminds us that when men believe that by merely saying that they believe on Jesus Christ, or by asking forgiveness of the priests, and when absolved believe that they have done all that is necessary, they are mistaken. And if they rest in that contentment, they will find themselves as I was when they come to spirit life. No belief of this kind or absolution by the priests will put them in such condition of memory or soul as will enable them to have these soul longings of which I speak. You may think that I am quite a preacher, but I am very ignorant of the bulk of the spiritual truth, and what I have said is the result of my own experience. Now, that last sentence, to my mind anyway, is a real sign of progress. To know that you have a very limited knowledge of something requires some sense of how much more is out there waiting for you. And that in itself shows an increase in awareness and a valuable humility. This knowledge has come to John Carlisle as a matter of experience, from his willingness to apply what he has learned from communicating with James Padgett, and from being introduced to Padgett's people in spirit, who shared with Carlisle their knowledge of what it is to share in divine love. John Carlisle concludes his final message as follows. Well, I will not write more now, except to thank you and your friends for the opportunities that I have enjoyed in listening to your conversation on spiritual matters. I will not cease to come to you, even though I may not be able to write. So with my love and hope that you will pray for me, I am your friend and well-wisher. Good night. So the John Carlisle we meet 18 months after his previous message is a very different John Carlisle, not without his challenges, but definitely headed in the right direction and already beginning to benefit. A century on, we can only imagine how bright and beautiful he must be by now, and with a wealth of experience of what it is to share in divine love. So definitely someone I hope to be privileged to meet when I pass to spirit. It's striking also that someone who led a life that caused him embarrassment in spirit still had in him that desire to be someone better, and which was no doubt brought into focus by the experience of passing to spirit and seeing the consequences of his life choices. There's something in that keeps me hopeful for the future of all human beings, no matter how awful their actions in this world might seem at the time. So we say thank you to John Carlisle for showing us his story, to James Padgett for writing it, and to all those in spirit who enabled this instance of mediumship, not least James's wife Helen, for deciding that John Carlisle should be given the opportunity to write. Without that act of mercy on Helen's part, we would never have heard this story and never have learned from it. In the next video in this midweek series, I'll take you through a message to James Padgett from one of his boyhood chums, now in spirit, called Frank Davis. This is the third of 3 messages given to James on March 7, 1916. The other 2 are the messages we looked at in videos 213 and 215. The message from Frank Davis is followed by a short one from Helen commenting on what Frank has to say. The next video in the Divine Love series will be video 1016, where we'll be looking at a message from Luke given on October 24, 1915, in which he explains why Jesus' tomb was found empty. This is a fascinating, if challenging, message. So I hope you'll join me for one or other of those. As always, if you've enjoyed this video, please do like it and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It all helps to introduce this material to other people who might benefit from it. So this brings us to the end of today's video. If you do have any thoughts on it, feel free to comment on it in the comments section. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care until then. Bye-bye.